Hello guys, welcome to the Eat Like Ruby podcast. I am back with yet another chat about fat loss, but what we're going to look at today is a little bit more of the mindset side of fat loss. So in our recent episodes, we looked at fat loss facts, we looked at fat loss actions, and we looked at setting up a flexible, enjoyable diet to pursue fat loss. So all of that shit is awesome. I'm all about the facts and the understanding and making sure people actually know what is required to achieve a fat loss goal, and then also making sure you've got the right actions and shit in place to do that. So that's why I wanted to cover those in the recent episodes, but I think there's just some really common mindset things that come up when we pursue fat loss that are worth touching on. And the thing I want to say here is there's going to be a couple of things that we have touched on in recent episodes that are going to come back up here, but I was mindful in those episodes to not go too far into them and go too off topic because I really wanted to cover the facts and the actions and stuff. Whereas today we're going to dig a little bit deeper into some of this mindset stuff. And the first thing I want to talk about, we've covered this in Eat Like Ruby before over the years, but it's worth always looking at when we start a fat loss phase, especially if you're a beginner and you're coming into flexible dieting and this new way of doing things for the first time. And that is clocking what dieting means to you and really becoming aware and understanding of what dieting means to you. And the reason I bring this up is because I think it is so common to have a really clear connection in our mind, whether we're conscious of that or whether we're not. But most people have a really clear definition of what dieting means and probably really clear connections of what dieting has looked like for you in the past. And often it can be quite negative. If we think about people following restrictive, shitty, miserable diets in the past, I'm always talking about these things, but it can be so common for people to have a pretty big history of implementing those or trying to follow those. So then when we look at the word dieting, the mind can instantly go to a place of like, dieting is hard, it means restriction, it's shitty, it's miserable, etc. If we think about some of the stuff we've touched on in recent episodes, we can quote diet towards so many different things, and we can set up diets for fat loss, we can set them up for maintenance, performance, muscle gain, and then we can also set up a diet for going on a holiday. And most people would hear that right away and go, I don't want to diet when I'm on holiday, but that's exactly what I'm talking about. Dieting doesn't have to be restrictive and miserable and missing out. So if your mind instantly went there thinking, who wants to diet on a holiday? That's exactly what we want to look at, is clocking the fact of, well, dieting actually just means eating food. Like if we look at what is your diet, everyone is on a diet at all times if you're eating food. So we can set that diet up to pursue so many different goals, and we can set it up in so many different ways. And if we come to that scenario of dieting on a holiday, when you have a really good understanding of nutrition and especially flexible dieting, you can go into things like holidays or different times of the year, different events, anything at all, and decide for yourself, what do I want my diet to look like during this time? So we come back to that question of what does dieting mean to you? If you have a really clear connection in your mind that dieting is a restrictive, miserable thing, we want to intercept that and go, it doesn't have to be. Maybe it has been in the past, but if I want to change that, which I'm assuming most people do if you're here and you're listening, that's awesome. But then you want to realize that in order to change that, we have to consciously start changing that. And the first step towards that is the awareness. What does dieting mean to me? And could I be open-minded to dieting actually meaning something different and being enjoyable, being flexible, being sustainable? And obviously, I'm going to really quickly touch on that line of we are going to be eating for the rest of our lives, because if we think about the fact that we can set dieting up to work towards so many different things, like I just said, we are going to be eating for the rest of our life. We want to know how to adjust our nutrition to suit all aspects of that life. So if we do have phases of wanting to pursue fat loss, maybe we then want to have phases of wanting to run a half marathon or pursue a muscle gain phase, or take a more relaxed approach to our nutrition, go on a holiday, have a time of year where we just don't give it as much energy as we do at other times. Again, the possibilities are endless. And if we're going to be eating for the rest of our life, we want to know how to work with all of those possibilities so we can set up our diet to do so. And therefore, we don't want to have that underlying connection that dieting is miserable, because we're essentially going to be dieting forever. But we can adjust that diet in so many ways. So really piece all of that together, and it almost segues into the second thing I wanted to talk about, which is having a little think about any of your old stories or your old habits that you're kind of running and clinging to. And what I mean by this is it can be really common to want to come into a new diet or a new approach like what we're talking about here, but then fall into the mindset of saying things like, I always do this, I never do this, I've always done it this way, I've never done it that way. I mean, if we want to look at that really simply, if you've always done it a certain way and you're here trying to find a better way, then we need to let go of the way we've always done it, because it obviously hasn't worked that well. And I always say that with love, there's no shame there. But we want to just catch that instant reaction that some people can have. Often when we're going into something new or we're trying something new, it can be common to get a little bit defensive, which is human nature, I think. But we want to just intercept that and go, okay, cool. If I'm looking at doing something new, and I think this can especially kick in if we are a beginner and we do have a little bit of a trial and error period where we're trying to get our head around all of this information and actually implement the new thing. If that feels a little bit confusing or scary or overwhelming at times, it can be so common to just go, I've never done it like this. Okay, well, that's fine, but could we do it like this? So just intercepting that thought is all we really want to do here, is just being like, okay, cool. Maybe I have never done it like this. Maybe I have always done it a certain way, but really just asking, do I still want to do it that way? If you do, that's awesome. Go off. But if you don't, we just want to catch that and be aware of it when it kicks in and just go, oh yeah, okay, that is true. I have always done shit a certain way, but that hasn't worked out that well for me. I'd actually love to try a new way. And if we pivot back to that initial point for a second, that we can, quote, diet towards so many things, I think it's a really important time right now. If you've been listening to the last few episodes and you're coming into a time of year where you've been thinking like, oh, yep, I'd love to use all this information and work towards my own fat loss phase, I think it's super important to just stop for a sec and make that assessment of, does this make sense for me in my lifestyle right now? Does it make sense for maybe other things I've got going on in my life? Anything at all? Because we want to have a little think about what we've touched on in recent episodes about what is required to achieve fat loss, the science, the facts, the actions, all of the things we've been talking about. If we're starting to get our head around those and understand what's going to be required of us to move towards a fat loss goal, I think it's important to make that little assessment and go, can I actually implement that right now? Does it work for my schedule, for my lifestyle, for my stress levels, for my calendar? Anything at all that you might personally have going on, I think it's just super important to piece it all together and go, if I know that that is what's required to pursue fat loss, does it work for me to do so right now? If it does, awesome. But if it doesn't, let that be okay. And this is one thing I've said in Eat Like Ruby for years. You can still listen to all of these episodes, take in all of this information, get your head around it, start to understand it, and even implement little things. And I'm going to talk about that in a second. But you can do that. And then when the time does come for you where it does feel right to implement it all, you can really knuckle down and do so. So I think it's, first of all, so common for people to have been so used to pursuing fat loss for their whole life and just assume that dieting has to mean fat loss. And so then when we pose the idea of like, well, could you diet towards something else for a while, or could you just move away from thinking about fat loss for a while? For some people, that's actually such a crazy idea because that's all they've ever known. So again, there's just the awareness piece around that where you just want to stop and go, have I just been trying to lose body fat for a really, really long time and never actually stopped and made the assessment of whether it makes sense for me to do so right now? And then I think the other little thing that we just want to clock as well is that if people have heard these recent episodes and been like, oh my God, Rubes is talking about this and she's giving all the info, I've got to use it. Let's remember that it's a podcast and it's always going to be there. So again, you might want to listen to all of these right now and start to understand it and go, oh yeah, cool information. That makes sense. I'm learning a lot, but I'm actually going to implement it maybe in January, maybe this time next year, literally any time that works for you to personally do so. And I think that's such a key factor right there. So many challenges and coaches and diets and meal plans and shit get thrown out there at this time of year where it's just like everyone should pursue this. And I think you got to strip that back and go, no, what should I pursue right now? And we did an episode, I think it was maybe last week, it'd be about 4 episodes ago, but it was like who should or shouldn't pursue fat loss. And it was just covering a few things that we want to think about. If you are considering doing a fat loss phase, I would definitely listen to that and just go, oh, do I fall into any of these categories? Do I need to consider any of this stuff before making my decision and starting to implement anything? And then the little thing in there that I said I was going to come back to is you can start to implement little things. And I think this right here is such an important thing for people to understand. Again, when we look at a lot of restrictive, crazy challenges and shit that come forward this time of year, often it's very much like, here's the rules. It's very intense. One size fits all. Ready, set, go. Rip in. If we think about the stuff we've talked about in the last few episodes where we need the deficit in place to achieve fat loss, we want to then think about monitoring our food intake to know if we have a deficit in place. We can potentially consider doing maintenance while we do that. We want to look at getting enough protein in the diet. We want to look at getting enough fiber in the diet, meeting the recommended daily intakes. If you don't know what I'm talking about, you want to listen to the last 2 to 3 episodes. We talked about all this stuff. But if you've been following along, think about the fact that we've spoken about a fair few things and we're going to speak about a ton more over the next few weeks and months. But you could start to take one little thing at a time and just implement that for a week. And I've said this in Eat Like Ruby for years. Everyone's going to have a different approach and learning style, if you will. And then everyone's going to have an actual different schedule and lifestyle happening right now. And you want to think about your schedule and lifestyle, but also just what works for you personally as a human being. Some people love to read every single piece of information, listen to every single thing, and implement it all balls to the wall, I'm all in, right? And if you know that style works for you, that can be great. On the flip side, you might know that you respond a lot better to just doing one little thing at a time. And if we come back to all those points I've been mentioning, you might just go, you know what? All I'm going to do right now is just start to get an idea of my intake. I'm just going to start to practice monitoring my food. Maybe I'll use a tracking app. Maybe I'll just write it all down. Maybe I'll take photos. You can literally do anything. But that might just be where you start. And then you might go, okay, cool. Now I'm going to start being mindful of how much protein I'm getting. Maybe you've literally never thought about that in your entire life. And you're like, I'm just going to start monitoring it. And then if I monitor it, maybe I'm going to start to look at ways I could increase it a little bit if I realize I'm not getting enough. And then once you've done that, you might move to fiber, then you might move to dietary fat, then you might look at your steps, you might look at your water intake, you might look at your sleep. We're going to talk about all these things as the weeks go on. But really just important to stop and think, what approach actually works for me based off of just what I know about myself and my history? Do I respond well to going all in? Or am I a person that should take a little bit more of a slow, moderate approach? And then also, how does that factor in with what the next 2 to 3 months looks like with my lifestyle as well? And this kind of segues into my other favorite quote, which is there's no right or wrong. And you guys are going to hear me say that so much over the next few weeks. And if you've been in Eat Like Ruby for a while, you would have heard it a lot. But there is no right or wrong way to go about this. There's no right way to eat and wrong way to eat. There's no right goal to have and wrong goal to have. We want to have all of the information, the education, the understanding of what's required to achieve different goals at different times. And then we want to reverse that and bring it back to ourselves and go, okay, cool. Knowing all of that information, knowing what choices would move me towards what things, what choices would move me towards other things, what choices do I want to make right now? How hard do I want to go right now? How much do I want to scale back right now? Because like I said, we can go all in and we can give 100% to a goal like this. Or we can make a really conscious choice, I'm going to give 70%, I'm going to give 30%. Like I said, I'm going to follow one habit at a time. And once I've got my head around that habit, I'm going to bring in the next one. And if that means I bring in a new habit every week or every fortnight, there's nothing, quote, wrong with that. And again, that almost comes back to the initial point of clocking what dieting means to you. Clock what you think is right and wrong with nutrition and training and dieting. And we can even bring this back to individual foods or food groups where people look at foods and go, that food is wrong, that food is bad, that food is right, that food is good. Think about our previous episodes where we've spoken about the fact that we can flexible diet and include all foods in our days of eating. And what's required for us to personally achieve fat loss is going to be different for every individual and from person to person based on so many factors. So even looking at that right there, we can't look at particular foods and food groups and just go, that food is good, that food is bad. Because it's well, good for what? And good for who? And good for what goal? And if we look at planning days of eating that work towards our goal, certain foods are going to be, quote, good at fitting into that day alongside other foods. And then if we have certain other foods in there, then other things might not fit in alongside them. If that doesn't make sense to you, that's totally fine. But if we think about planning a flexible diet where we can include all foods and we want those foods to add up in a certain way towards our goal, no single thing can just be black and white, good and bad, because it's how does it all come together to either leave me in a position of moving towards my goal or not? So again, just really, I feel like I just want to hone in on this really hard just to get this point across. If you look at individual foods or food groups and just say, these foods are good and these foods are bad, understand that any and all foods can be included in our diet while working towards any goals, including fat loss. And it's not about foods being good or bad. It's about making sure the collection and the sum of everything that we're doing adds up and aligns in a way that moves us towards the goal that we have at the time and the requirements of that goal for us individually. If you learn nothing else from me, learn to move away from categorizing foods as good and bad, right or wrong, black or white, clean, junk, healthy, not healthy, because it's our overall diet and all of our choices as a collection that are going to move us towards a particular goal at a particular time. And different foods and different amounts and different collections of those things are going to work for different goals at different times. So it is not black and white. It is not good or bad, and it is not right or wrong. If we come back to my initial point of things not being right or wrong, it's also not right or wrong to decide that you're going to give 100% or decide that you're going to give 30% or 70%. And as a little bit of a side note, in the coming days and weeks, I'm going to speak about how we can ramp things up and how we can scale things back at different times, and how we can even approach days where shit just might actually not go to plan and we feel like we can't give 100%. What can we do instead? What can we look at instead? I think that is a really important lesson, and it does tie into this no right or wrong stuff, because usually when we have a mentality of things being right or wrong with nutrition, we also then feel like if we can't do everything right, we may as well not do anything at all. And I have so much to say about that, so much so that it's its whole own episode. I'm going to bring that episode shortly. But if we come back and wrap up this right or wrong thing, it's not right to do certain things or wrong to do others. We want to understand what is required for us personally to achieve any goal at any time. And then we want to decide to what extent do we want to implement the actions and the shit that is required for that goal. And we can have phases where we implement heaps of things and we go really hard on a certain goal. And we can have phases where we scale a lot of things back. And we can change that at any time if we need to. And that really comes back to flexible dieting and setting up your diet in a way that works for you and your lifestyle for the long term. And I think a little thing that's worth mentioning here is we've had so many girls come through Eat Like Ruby and implement this to different extents. And what I mean is, like, I've had people who have been in Eat Like Ruby for 12 months and lost 20 kilos. Shout out Jenna, shout out Rach. There's so many of you, I could keep naming names, but you know who you are. But then at the same time, I've had girls that have come into Eat Like Ruby, taken things literally one step at a time and used 12 months to lose 6 kilos. This is not right. This is not wrong. Just like we have girls that come into Eat Like Ruby, take all this information and apply it to maintaining or working towards a performance goal or working towards gaining weight and gaining muscle. None of these are right or wrong. They're perfect for the individual. So it's so important for you to move away from that right and wrong mentality and work out what is perfect for you right now. And this is one of the reasons that I never, ever refer to Eat Like Ruby as a challenge. If you send me a DM that says, Ruby, I love your fat loss challenge, I will block you. Challenge is the literal C word to me. I would rather you actually drop the C word in my inbox, because the word challenge, when we're looking at nutrition and training and especially fat loss, can just be such a negative approach for people to take, and usually has been a negative approach for people in the past. If we think about the real typical challenges that we can see come up in gyms or online or anywhere at all, usually it is, like I said before, one set of rules, very intense, very aggressive, go as hard as you can, have as much restriction as you can. This is right, this is wrong, this is black, this is white, etc. Sometimes people can tough it out for the duration. Sometimes people can't even stick to it for 3 days. But regardless, if we look at something like a 6-week challenge, people get to week 7 and they're like, okay, cool. Well, I don't want to keep eating in that really restrictive, intense way forever, but I have no idea what to do from here. That is the absolute total opposite of what I want people to experience when they listen to Eat Like Ruby. Because again, I want you to have the information and education to know what's required to achieve a goal, but then I want you to feel like you're in control of implementing different things at different times, knowing that your goal can change, knowing that your lifestyle will change, etc. And you can adjust with that for the rest of your life. Come back to a challenge that has an end date, and then people move into that next week and go, well, all I know is how to implement something very restrictive and very miserable. I don't want to do that because it's restrictive and miserable, so I don't know what to do instead. If you can relate to that, you're absolutely not alone. There's a reason I harp on about this. But this kind of ties back to the point that I said before, where people can dig in their heels and go, I've always done it this way, I've never done it this way. If you've always done something a certain way and it kind of sounds like what I just said, with a lot of restriction and misery, etc., then we want to look and go, okay, cool, if I've always done it like that and it hasn't really worked and I'm not feeling that good, I got to detach from all that shit. I've got to detach from that challenge word and really think about learning how to set up flexible, sustainable, enjoyable nutrition for myself and my goal right now, but also to continue eating for the rest of my life and working towards any other goals or any other things that are going to come up in that life. And another little thing that's worth touching on with the right and wrong stuff and the challenge stuff, etc. Usually if people have been in these mentalities or these environments before, you can be in the habit of asking things like, is this allowed? And people will often say this in regards to like, am I allowed to go out for tea? Am I allowed to have a coffee every day? Am I allowed to have a wine at night on the weekends, etc.? Really bring this back to everything we've been talking about. There's certain protocols that you can put in place to work towards your goal at the time, and those are going to be different from person to person. you can then learn how to plan your days to hit those protocols, and you can decide, can I fit in a wine into that day? Can I fit coffee into that day? Does it make sense for me to go out for dinner? If I am going to go out for dinner, what does that mean for the rest of my food choices for the day? And side note, we're going to talk a little bit more about eating out in the next few weeks, but it's not about things being allowed or not allowed. It's about understanding how those things can factor into a day and then deciding for yourself and just for that day and for that week, does it actually work for me to fit this thing in? If it does, awesome, you absolutely can. If you decide that it doesn't, that's totally fine as well. And a really tangible example of this is, let's say, for example, you have a fat loss goal and you know that in order to progress towards that goal, working towards a daily target of 1900 calories is what's required of you to progress towards that goal. And please just know this is absolutely an example. But if you know that for you, and then if you look at the coffee that you personally like to drink and you know that that coffee is a 200 calorie coffee, right? You can then look at your day and go, okay, cool. Well, if I have 1900 calories to work with and a coffee is going to take up 200 of them, can I then plan the rest of my day and factor in my dinner and my breakfast and my lunch and tick the boxes of protein, fiber, etc., and make that coffee work alongside that? If you can, that's awesome. You can absolutely do so. On the flip side, you might start planning that day and go, you know what? I don't personally want to spend 200 calories on that. I feel like it's a bit of a waste. I'd rather put them towards something else right now, so I won't get the coffee. Again, come back to the fact that it's not right or wrong. It's not about whether that coffee is, quote, allowed. It's about whether you can make it work for your goal and you want to make it work for your goal. And you can decide, you might have weeks where you go, you know what, I need my coffee this week. I'm absolutely making that work. And then on the flip side, you might get to the next week and then have a dinner or a snack or something that you really want to work into your day. And you're like, oh, I'd rather actually ditch the coffee at the moment and use those 200 calories towards that thing. That is flexible dieting. That is learning how to plan days that work for you and your goals and your lifestyle and everything at the time. I could talk about this all day. If you haven't noticed, I already have been. But that's what we want to know. Instead of thinking in terms of things being allowed or not allowed, right or wrong, you don't have to ask permission of someone if you're, quote, allowed to eat a coffee or allowed to go out for dinner. You want to be able to say, I understand what is required to progress towards the goal that I currently have. I am in control of planning my days and making choices to move towards that goal or move away from that goal if I want to. And I will decide whether I want to factor this thing in or not. And so often I speak about the fact that a lot of people feel like they haven't had control and they haven't known this stuff for a really long time. And that's such a shitty feeling because maybe you do want to have a coffee or have a wine or go out for dinner and you're like, I just don't know whether I can or I should or how to do it or anything like that. If we look at our advanced gals who are listening right now, and we've spoken about them in recent episodes, again, you were probably in that position once in your life and you've done the work to now be in a position where you feel like you can make informed, mindful, controlled choices about what would just best suit you and where you're at right now. And that is an unreal position to be in. So like I always say, if you're an advanced person, just clock that as such a win for you. And if you're a beginner and you're not there yet, use these advanced girls as evidence that you can absolutely get there. And the way that we start getting there, in my opinion, is we intercept the thoughts of things being good, bad, right, wrong, or allowed, not allowed. And we start to think about how we can apply education and information to make those choices for ourselves. And right now, I've actually got my laptop in front of me for notes on this topic, but I haven't looked at them once. And I think we're like half an hour in because I've been talking about this shit for a decade. But just had a little look at my notes and there's two things in there, like word for word, I want to read out. One of them says, you're, quote, allowed to do whatever you like. You're a grown-ass human being, right? And let's really remember that. You are allowed to do what you like. You are a grown-ass human being. So you want to have the education and information to make those decisions for yourself. And that kind of comes into the next thing I had in the notes, which is being told what to do is a big outsource of power. If I'm always just being told what to do next, I'm not learning. And then again, if I find myself in the first week after a challenge or after working with a coach or anyone and no one's telling me what to do, I don't know what to do. And the last thing I had written under that is have the tools to make the decision yourself and take back your power. And I mean, I think that's unreal. I think taking back your power is really where we then segue into you're going to be eating for the rest of your life. So you want to take back your power in terms of being able to do so. And there's two quick little things I want to touch on to wrap up this mindset convo. And one of them is we can decide how hard we want to go at something. We can decide what we want to fit into our day, what we don't, what we want to trade off, etc. Everything we've just spoken about. And what we always want to come back to is simply just asking, am I okay with this choice? Instead of asking, am I allowed or is this right, etc., really ask, based on what I'm learning about nutrition, am I okay with this choice? Whatever your choices are. So that might be something as simple as like factoring in the coffee and the wine, and you just want to be able to ask, am I okay with this choice and the way this is adding up and factoring this into my day? Or it might be what we spoke about before, where maybe you choose to implement one little habit at a time. That is absolutely fine, so long as you're happy with that choice. You might decide to go all in, balls to the wall, give 100% to everything. Again, ask yourself, am I happy with this choice? Because it can be super common for people to fall into a bit of victim mentality when it comes to nutrition. And the more we can understand nutrition and what's required to achieve our goals, the more we can make these choices and we don't get to play victim to our choices. And that's such an important thing to be aware of and to accept. If you have the information, you can make whatever choices you want to suit you and your goals and your day and everything at the time. And the more education and information you have, the more you can make the best choices for you at that time. And you don't get to play victim to those. And there's going to be people that hear that are low-key like, I love playing victim, so this sucks. If that's you, you and I probably don't speak the same language and you might be in the wrong place. On the flip side, if you hear that and think, hell yeah, I don't want to be a victim to nutrition. I want to be in control of this. I want to feel like I can take this in any direction that I want to at any time. You and I absolutely do speak the same language and you're in the perfect place. And the very last thing I want to say here, one thing that I think is cool to just stop for a little second and think about with yourself is whatever position you're in right now, maybe in your actual body composition, maybe in your habits, your mindset, your actions, your results, anything at all, just stop and think about yourself personally and ask, would I be okay if I was still in this position in 6 months' time? Would I be happy if I was still in this position in 6 months' time? And then ask, would I be happy if I was still in this position in 12 months' time? Would I be happy if I was still in this position in 5 years? And what can sometimes happen there is when we say 6 months, sometimes people are like, hell no, but some people are like, yeah. And then if you think, okay, cool, do you still want to be in this position in 12 months? Probably not. Do you still want to be in this position in 5 years? Most people are like, hell no. If you're in a position right now with any of those things I just said that you're not happy with, really think about, do I want to stay in this position for 6 months, 12 months, 2 years, 5 years, anything like that? Because at some point when you go through those, you're probably going to hit one where you're going to go, hell no. If I'm still in this position in 5 years, that is not okay with me. And then once you've answered that, you want to reverse engineer that and go, okay, well, if not, how and when is that changing? And then we can think about everything we've spoken about in this episode where we maybe dig in our heels and say, I've always done it this way, I like doing it this way, etc. If you don't want to be in the same position in 1, 2, or 5 years' time, at what point are we intercepting all of that and starting to change it? That is all from me today on the Mindset Chat. There's so much mindset stuff that can come up with a fat loss phase, so I'm sure we'll touch on some more stuff over the coming days and weeks and months. If you've just jumped into this episode, I would definitely go back and listen to the last, I'd say 3 to 5 episodes, because we've really been talking about setting up a successful fat loss phase. So if that's something that you want to hear all about, those episodes are absolutely the place to go. But apart from that, guys, thank you so much for listening. I'm going to be back very soon. In the next few convos, I'm going to look at people with a big fat loss goal versus people with a small fat loss goal, and also people who are maybe in the mindset of thinking calorie deficits don't work for me. We're going to touch on all of that really, really soon. So thank you so much for listening, and I will talk to you then. The Eat Like Ruby podcast is not a substitute for professional medical or dietary advice. The advice given in this episode is general in nature and should not be used to treat any medical conditions, health conditions, illnesses, injuries, and/or any nutrition-related conditions, deficiencies, or similar. This podcast is not to be used as or in place of medical advice or dietary advice. Please consult your healthcare professional before implementing any of the advice, information, or protocols discussed in this episode.